Hi guys, welcome to the DevXP channel. My name is Seth Samuel, and today I'm going to be sharing some tips that I think you can make your app feel faster than it is actually. And mind you, I say how you can make your app feel faster, not necessarily how to make your app faster, because that would be optimization and that would be language specific or technology specific. But in this video, I'm just going to be sharing general tips. So whether you're a React developer, whether you're a Flutter developer, .NET, PHP, whatever it is that you do, just makes the apps feel a little bit faster. And most of these tips are not technology specific. It's just tips that can be applied to anything, like I said. And the next thing is I'm going to be sharing some of the example, the code snippets in Dart. I'm sure you can just feel right at home just looking at the code because it's just very simple code. It's not like anything complex. Now, let's get right into it. So the first tip that I want to share is always cache your images. And the basic idea is, imagine that you have like an image, right? You have like a bunch of images on your website. So say for example you have an e-commerce website whereby there are a lot of products on the website. If you say that for every time that someone visits that page, that image has to be gotten from the server, it's going to put a strain on your server. I know CDNs have this by default enabled, and they actually allow you to cache them, but if you are fetching your image directly from your server itself, you might not have that caching implemented. And it's very important that you have that implemented because it can make your app feel fast, because the image doesn't have time to load, because you can just get a local version. Now, caching is different from downloading the image, because downloading the image, you don't download the image at random. So you just whenever you make a request to the image, then you download the image locally and then you keep. While that works, the problem with that approach is that you may end up fooling the client's storage for just no reason. But with caching, it works more intelligently to see number one, if the files change or the file doesn't change. So caching is like a bit complex, and is the reason why I would recommend a library. Use a library for it. In Flutter, a very good library that I think is you can use is in Flutter cache images, and you can just look at it. It's very simple to use and it just works like a normal image, and then it just caches your images. I'm sure React and the rest have something similar, but always find a library to do the caching instead of just relying on it yourself. The next tip that I want to share is cache your requests whenever possible. Now this is similar to caching your images, but now you are not caching just the image, you're caching the entire request. React query does this out of the box, and I think that's the whole premise of React query. But that and other languages also have their own implementation. So just cache the request as much as possible, and the reason for that is that it makes your request feel a little bit faster. Now, like I said, if it's dynamic data, then it's not wise to cache it, because sometimes it's very hard to work with that kind of data. But if the data is not like that dynamic, it's best that you cache it. Like I said, caching is a bit complex, and is the reason why I always recommend using a library to cache instead of implementing the caching yourself, because caching can really hurt you really bad if it's not done right. So always make sure that you know what you are doing, or just depend on your library, to implement it for you. Next thing I want to share is use local storage to store static data. So what do I mean by that? So let's look at an example, right? So now in this example, you have something called a reg, and it's basically the registration model. And how this works is that you first get this is called a Hive box, and basically a Hive is like local storage for Flutter. So if you know how local storage work, Hive work exactly how like that. So basically just stores data locally for you. So in this stage, what I just do is whenever the request is made, I get to store it in that box. So I store the request locally, and whenever that request is asked, whenever like this function runs, so basically you just get the courses that the school offers. So as I'm trying to get these courses, I'll first return the normal courses that are already available. So this gets added to the recent one that's already in the local storage. Then before I make the request to server, and the server is a bit slow, so this really helps in speeding things up. So the user just instantly get the list of courses, and then whenever the request from the server is gotten, then I can update the record and then to render again to show the current latest list of courses, which most times it doesn't change, but this is just in case it changes without me knowing. So I can just get the latest version, and then the UI can get the latest version of the list of courses. And if you use the app, this feels really fast. It feels really fast because you are using local storage, and local storage will always be faster than getting from the network. And another advantage of this approach is it allows the app to automatically work offline. So in case this request doesn't go through, you still have the list of courses here and it doesn't change, and then the app just works smoothly. So in case of network breakdown, in case of offline implementation, all of this just works automatically just because of this implementation. So it makes the app fast, it makes it run offline, and then just gives you a better. Next tip is make as few requests as possible. And what does that mean? What do I mean by that? Basically, look for requests that multiple widgets or multiple components need in your app, and then find a way of making them at the top level. This is where your state management skills comes into play, because you have to find a way of making that request once. Whatever request that you're trying to make, right? Always try to make it once, except if there's a need to remake it again. So say for example now you want to get the information of the user, you should find a way of making it once, because the user information doesn't change. So say for example 3 components need the user information. It really doesn't make sense to make that request to the server 3 times, because you're just putting unnecessary load on the server and then incurring costs to the app. So just make as few requests as possible. Sit down and think about it. Whatever data you're trying to work with, where can you put it at the topmost level so that other components that also need that data can have it? So like I said, basically state management. The next one is make optimistic requests. So basically what optimistic requests means is you update the UI before getting the information from the server. So say for example in this case I'm supposed to make a request, right, to get the list of courses, but making an optimistic request here whereby I get the list of courses from the local storage and then I'll update the UI with those list of courses before I get the actual courses from the server. Now what this does is it makes the app just feel fast, because as the user is clicking, the app is moving. The problem with this approach is sometimes the request may fail, and when they fail, the user may be seeing all the data instead of the latest data. So you have to tread very carefully. But the good thing about optimistic requests is that most times your request in your server doesn't break, like it doesn't error out. Most times, most of the requests that you make, if you know what you're doing, if you make a very good app, most of your requests goes through. So it's not, the request is not something that always breaks. So you can just say and that's the reason why I'm making an optimistic request here, because I know that 9 out of 10 this request will go through, except if there's no network. And like I said, this works offline. So if there's no network, then you know that okay, this is an offline version of the thing. But find a way of making optimistic requests, right? And that makes your server works really fast. A classic example of a service that makes optimistic requests is Firestore on Firebase. So whenever you're trying to make a change to data, or whenever you're trying to get data, it always keeps a cached version of that data, and whenever you need that data, it provides you that data as quick as possible before it updates itself. And it's the reason why it works offline, because it makes this optimistic request, and whenever anything goes wrong, it can easily reverse. But you have to really tread carefully, like I said, because This can really turn out and bite you right when you don't expect it to. But be very careful with this. But it really makes your app feels very fast. Then the next one is make short animations. This is a very controversial one because many people don't sit down and think about how long the animation takes. So they just make a fancy animation and then just move on. But sometimes, I don't know if you have ever noticed, right? If you have ever used like an Android and then use an iPhone, there's this feeling that you feel like the iPhone is a bit slow. It's a bit slower than the Android, and the basic reason is because iPhone animations usually take longer than most Android animations, except if the OEM changes the animation. So Android animations just happen faster. And sometimes if you're even looking for tips on how to make your phone run fast, one of the tips that they will give you is reduce the animation time for your Android phone. So don't sit down and make really long animations. It makes your app really feel slow. Make your animations as quick as possible. Don't make them unnecessarily long. So for example, for me, the number for me that I usually use for animations is 500 milliseconds. I hardly use more than 500 milliseconds, and for me that's the sweet spot for me. So, but you can also find your own sweet spots. It can be 400, it can be 300, it can be 700, it can be 600. But please don't make animations that are up to a second long, because a second long animation, any user can easily pick it up to say this animation is really really slow. Except if there are a lot of things that are changing. So if many things are changing on the screen, then it can be tolerable. But if it's just one thing that is changing on the screen, then it's not tolerable. So just make your animations as short as possible, but don't make them too short again, because if you make them too short, the user don't get to appreciate the animation and the work you put into it. Then use as little packages as possible. Now, this is especially for JavaScript developers. I know JavaScript developers really love packages. We really love our packages. But please, some of these packages, sometimes you just need one functionality or maybe one function from that package, and then that function comes with thousands of lines of code just for you to just use one of them. If you are using like something like React, add to your bundle size, and then before you know, your app is running really slow. Another tip to add to that is always remove packages that you don't need. So as you are using as little as possible, also remove the ones that you don't need. So let's say for example you are finding like a caching library, right, for your app. As you try this library and you see that it doesn't work for you, please, before you try the next one, remove this current one, because sometimes you easily forget it and then you have a bloated app that just dilutes a lot of code, but it doesn't use any of it. So use as little packages as possible. The next thing is don't do too much on your main thread. So whenever you're using like a single threaded languages like Dart or JavaScript, it's very tempting for you to just do everything on the main thread. So you don't think about multi-threading or doing multi-processing or like pushing some of your workload to other processes. You just focus all your energy on that main thread. And then the problem is sometimes it can make your app really slow, especially the UI. Sometimes you see like some website or some apps, you're clicking something and it's not responding. The reason is because it's doing too much on the main thread. Or sometimes you see your animation like going then stopping, like they have this kind of feeling of, because they just call it junk. So basically you're just keeping frames. So for example, if you have a spinning bar, as it's spinning, sometimes you see like it just keeps some of the step and then it just moves on and then it just keeps growing, and then you're like, what is happening? Sometimes it's not bother you, but sometimes it makes your app feel low quality. So try as much as possible to do as little on the main thread as possible. When you want to do something complex, when you want to like run a complex animation or a complex computation, move it away from the main thread. In Flutter, it's really easy with the spawn. It's very easy to spawn new processes, but in JavaScript it's a bit complex. But you can use web workers. Web workers easily allows you to do more complex things. For example, now if you want to compress an image, most of these libraries that compress images for you usually use a web worker to do it for you. And I know web workers are a bit more complex to work with, but I know that you can find a library that can help you really work with them. So think about it. Don't do too much on the main thread, so that your app doesn't have junks and then it doesn't feel slow. Now the next one is compress your images. Compress your images. I'm not only saying change the file type, because I think sometimes you just change the file type to just maybe like just say WebP, for example, and then you just move on your life. You think that everything's fine. But it's a really nice practice to compress your images, because you may say, our users don't really care about their data, so they just use their app and they don't really care how much your website is consuming or how much data your app is consuming. Yes, but sometimes it can make your app really load slow. Imagine you being on Instagram, right? And then your network is fine. There's nothing wrong with your network. But as you're scrolling, almost every post you see has a loading bar and it's loading. So as you scroll the next post, it's loading. You scroll to the next post, it's loading. It will really make Instagram's user experience really bad. But when your images are compressed, loading your apps will be very easy. Your images has no business being up to 5 megabytes. Your images has no business being up to 2 megabytes. I think the limit for image size should be 1 megabyte. That's the most high top quality image that you can possibly find. It should be around 1 megabyte, so that it just loads fast. So no matter how many images you are loading into your app, it should just load as quick as possible. For me, I would say the golden rule is let the user never see the progress indicator. Let no image show that it's loading on your app. And the best way to do that is having compressed images. So I know sometimes as front-end developers, you may not have the power to influence whether your image gets compressed or not. But really talk to the back-end guys, or just implement it yourself, and then when they complain, then you can remove it. But always implement compression. Compress your image. Have a golden rule. Have a benchmark. So say for example, 1 megabyte. No image past 1 megabyte. Any image that is more than 1 megabyte, compress it. The last tip that I want to share is lazy load your images. Now, if you don't know what lazy loading is, it's basically showing images that the user can see. So let's say for example now, there's something called a viewport, and basically a viewport is what the user can see. So say for example in this app, this is the viewport. So from here to here to here, this is the viewport of the app, right? And whenever I scroll, nothing, like let's assume this is a website, so this should only load when it's in the viewport. If it's not in the viewport, then it should not be loaded. And that's how to make your app feel a little bit faster, because instead of like the traditional way of doing it, whereby if you open a web page, all the images try to get loaded. So sometimes the images can be much. So imagine that you don't run compression now, and you have 5 megabyte images, and then you have 100 of them. You can easily calculate how much megabyte that is, and all of them are trying to load at the same time. It will really make your website really slow, and then reduce the quality of your website. But by the time that you implement lazy loading, what it does is the user only gets to see it's only the images that the user is seeing within his viewport. That's the images that get loaded, and then it improves on the loading time. So in Flutter, by default, if you are using Lazy View Builder, it automatically handles this for you. So it lazy loads both building the components and loading the images. But if you are using the web, then you should add the lazy attributes to your images. Most modern browsers support that, and you can Google about lazy loading images in HTML. Most modern browsers support that. So basically, it just allows you to just lazy load your images and makes your app images load a lot faster than how they're supposed to be. So I hope you find these tips useful, and let me know in the comment section what other tips you want to share with the community and what other tips I missed, and let me know if you find this video also useful down in the comment section, and we'll continue the conversation from there. And don't forget to subscribe, like and comment. It's really important for us. And then lastly, don't forget to buy our merch. I'll be leaving a link to the store in the description. Please do well to check out our merch. It's my collection. Hope you find this video useful. and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.